What is going on YouTube? Today I'm going to break down the mix of my song Keep Your Time. So I already did a production video of this, breaking down like all the production, all the sounds, basically like how I arranged it, even some things about like how I wrote it and how I structured the harmonies. So if you want to go back and check that out before you check this out, then you know that might give you a little bit more context as like how these sounds actually came together. And of course, please listen to the song before for context, because that'll give you a much clearer idea of what the final product sounds like. And you know, hopefully I can answer some of your questions in this video. But first I'm going to go ahead and play the song just so you get an idea of like, you know, what it sounds like. I'll play maybe like a minute and a half, just the ending of it basically.
I took a shot, we caught our breath, you brushed me off for summer left. No, the timing was never perfect, but was trying for better, worth it. I distraction, you relief. I need passion, you need sleep. Well, I guess no one had the answers till they crept out from underneath. I never asked for forever, but hey, you'll say I tried. Whatever helps you sleep at night. But baby, don't act like you're better, cause hey, you're losing your mind. So I'll keep my heart, you keep your time. And I never asked for forever, but hey, you'll say I tried. Whatever helps you sleep at night.
Cool, so that gives you an idea of like, you know, just how the song goes in general and how it sounds, how the final kind of product sounds. So let me start with the vocals. So first of all, you know, I have many vocal layers. I'm just gonna focus on kind of like the hook basically. But like I have my vocals sent to different buses. I have all my main vocals going to a main Vox bus, and then I compress all that stuff, I DS all that stuff. Like I think there's like 2 main vocals going to this bus. So let me actually just solo the hook section. That way we can just kind of like work on that a little bit. So basically like the main vocals are, you know, consisting of this. So I have 2 kind of like heavy vocals, and those are being sent to the main vocal bus. That basically just like is doing some compression. The biggest thing, you know, before we do all this, you know, of course there's editing, and of course there's like, you know, arranging the vocals and leveling them out, you know what I mean? So as you can see, like I have these vocals, the hook heavy 1 and 2, that's like the raspy vocals, that's up all the way, panned 37 to the left, 37 to the right. Then I got my low also kind of leveled out around the same place, but the low is going to the harmony vocals, and you know, that's, you know, just a little bit. So the harmony vocals, as you can see, are a little bit lower. Yeah, you can see they're a little bit lower on the fader here, and the harmony vocals are also going to that harmony vocal folder. So like the only difference is that in the verse, you can see that the low vocals, I also send the low vocals to the main vocal bus, which isn't really that big of a deal. But you know, the big takeaway from here is that I process my main vocals separately from my like backup vocals, and I have all my harmonies, all my backup vocals all going to the same vocal bus, because I've found that if they're doing the same thing, you can actually like process them the same. Like you can process them with 1 de-esser, 1 compressor, all that stuff. You end up saving processing later. The only time that this would not work is if you have vocals doing different rhythms, like if you have 2 contrasting vocal parts, because a compressor won't know how to act when you have 2 vocals doing different things and you're sending them both to the same compressor. So that's not the case here at all. Basically, yeah, I got my main vocals going to this first vocal bus, and I'm going to break down that vocal chain right now. So first I have a de-esser. Let me actually, the best bet, just to be fair to everyone, is to bypass everything, and that way you will see. That's a filter. Okay. Oh, real quick, if you want to know how I got that effect at the beginning of the song. So here's... That's it. It's just a filter. Literally just like everything. You know, filter plus reverb is just literally everything below like 600 hertz, and that's like, you know, that's my sauce, is just putting the chorus at the beginning. Opens up a little bit, and then towards the end, just automate this up so that it kind of like, you know, has a little bit of like progression to it, and it kind of just like opens up a little bit and just kind of leads into that verse, you know, with a little bit of like impact. So that's all that is. Now going back to the section that I was going to do. Cool. So here are these vocals kind of raw. And one thing that's worth noting, I'm actually going to give you guys my plugin, my vocal chain right now. It's an AT4060 tube mic into an Avalon, into a distressor. On the Avalon, I'm actually EQing out like 150, 250, and 350 by like 2-ish decibels. On the compressor, I'm actually driving it like pretty hard. I think I'm compressing like 10 or so decibels. Maybe even, yeah, that's kind of a lot, but I compress with the distressor on like a 4:1 ratio, and I you know, have fast attack time. I think it's like, you know, a half. It's like a 0.5 attack time, and then the release time is also like pretty fast. It's like a 0.5 release time. Honestly, I have it set up here. It's like a 0.5 attack and a 0.5 release, just like fast as hell. Fast attack, fast release for aggressive vocals is what I found works for my voice. So anyway, here's what that sounds like without any plugins. Yeah, it's so dry. So basically just this de-esser, doing a little bit of de-essing, because when you have multiple vocals happening, you know, you gotta like take care of your S's, or else they'll just like stack on top of each other and you just have like a super S-y vocal sound. So yeah. So it's de-essing more than just the S's. It looks like it's de-essing some of the consonants as well, but that's okay because my vocal is super attacky, and you know, I don't really think it's hurting it in any way. Sometimes when you de-ess too much, it's like, you know what I mean? It muffles it, so you gotta be careful. After that, I have an EQ that's basically just like kind of taking out some low end, taking out some mid range. You know, and then after that, I have this compressor. So this compressor is kind of a bitch just because you can't gain stage properly with it, but you can see I'm basically taking it down like 5 to 7 decibels. I already have like a distressor compressing it, but this actually just pumps it up and brings it forward a little bit. So yeah, basically just like compressing like roughly like an average of like 5 decibels. And then so this vocal is super bitey. What I've found is that my vocal, I think I might need a new microphone or something, because my vocal is so bitey around like 3K. So like I put Soothe on there to just kind of like, you can see it. Look, you see all that shit? So here's without it.
So I'll keep my heart, you keep your time. I never asked for forever.
And here's with it.
But hey, I'll say I tried. Whatever helps you sleep at night.
You can see that this like,
but baby, don't act like you're better.
That like 2K to 4K. I'm like, I swear to God, like I'm like the king of bitey vocals when I mix my shit. I'm just like, bro, like what do I do? Do I swallow a bunch of salt water? Like, you know what I mean? Like what? So I'm just like, all right, I guess I'll just use Soothe on it. And it's gargling with salt water. That's what does it. No, just kidding. That's just that's if you're sick. But anyway, I got my fast compressor. So I've actually shot out between 0.1 and 0. Like, call me crazy, but like I like the sound of the attack at 0 more so than even just a little bit less than 0 or 0.1 or yeah, I don't know if I was tripping or not, but like I shot it out between 0.1 and 0. And I like how it sounds better tucked in. It's not like, I feel like I'm not crazy. Like listen to it with the 0.1. And now listen to it with the 0. I feel like the 0.0 just tucks it in just that much more. And so it's just like, okay, well, I want my vocal to be tucked in because it's so like dynamic and uneven, like in certain, as far as like the consonants go and the attack of certain words, because I'm just like screaming into the mic. So like, I like it tucked in with a fast attack time. Normally a fast attack time will kind of like push the vocal a little bit too far back, but in this case, it really worked. So, and I just have the auto release on and I put the drive up a little bit to add some color to it. Just nothing crazy. Yeah, so I love this compressor. This kind of like FG Red. It's, you can see it's doing a lot too. It's doing like 5 decibels or so. So I have 2 compressors. Or 3 compressors, I guess if you count the distressor. So the distressor is doing like 10 or so dB, maybe around that much. Then the, you know, Teletronics is doing like 5 dB. And then this one's doing like 5 dB. You know what I mean? So like now my vocal is like compressed and doesn't need any more compression. It like, you know, other than like, you know, multiband compression, which is what I do next. So this is my trick, right? I do, you know, a band kind of between like, 100 and 500-ish area and just compress just the mid-range and just even it out. So that's like a big trick is like after sometimes compression can add mid-range, especially RVox. If you use RVox plugin, there's so much mid-range that gets added to that. So like you kind of got to use a multi-band compressor just to like even out that mid-range a little bit. So yeah. You can see it's ducking some of that mid-range a little bit when some of those like notes hit and when some of that like, some of that mid-range is a little too beefy. So that's the goal there. And then this EQ is dope. So this is like, adding a little bit of 8K to my voice to add some shine to it. And it looks like I'm actually adding a little bit of 200 as well, probably for some warmth or something. So here's the 200. Just a little bit, and then the 8K, you can see that's like that crispy. Here's without it. Here's with it. It really brightens the vocal up. I'm telling you, like 8K on any of these Pultecs on a vocal really just puts the vocal to the center and just kind of brightens it up. Here's one more time without it. And here's with it. Full disclaimer, it turns the volume up. This plugin does. There's nothing you can do about it. But yeah, you could tell the vocal just sounds so much brighter with that 8K on there. That like presence, you know what I mean? That's huge. And then after that, I have a virtual tape machine on here to just add a little bit more warmth to the vocal. Here's without it. Here's with it. It warms it up a little bit because we took out some of that mid-range, with the multi-band compressor and the EQ. So like the first EQ. So this kind of just adds a little bit back. But now that we've used the multi-band compressor, what it adds back is a little bit more even and consistent and less dynamic in volume. So, that's one trick that I do is I even the mid-range out and then I add it back in and just an overall mid-range. Like overall, the mid-range is more even after you kind of like tame it and then add some back in. Then I use this EQ to do a little bit more with the air. So that's just air, you know what I mean? That's just like adding a little bit more like shine to the vocal, like you know what I mean? Just air. And then I'm adding a little bit of, I guess, 361 just to add a little bit more body to the vocal overall. Just a little bit, so. Yeah.
But hey, I'll say I tried. Whatever helps you sleep at night.
Yeah, so that just a little bit. Like this EQ is dope. It comes with a Slate bundle, the Slate subscription, and it's actually like it's not very subtle. Like usually I do when I work with this EQ, I do like 0.5 on whatever changes I make just because it's a little crazy, but it will give you kind of what you're looking for, especially on vocals, is what I've found. So that's the vocal bus. So at this point, like I'm actually working with my, it's the same, more or less the same vocal bus for my backups. Maybe the EQ might be a little bit different, but nah, it's like pretty much the same. It's the same on the backups and the mains. So as far as like the plugin chain goes, and yeah, it looks like I'm even adding the same amount of 8K there. So at this point, when I made all of these EQ, when I made all the moves, I have a bus that's summing the main and the harmonies, and that bus is what sends to the the reverb and the delay and everything. So I'm actually like, contrary to some of my other songs, like I'm sending like all the vocals to all the effects using just this one bus. I made all these moves with all the vocals in mind because I kind of wanted to mix all the vocals together past this point. Yeah, because I found that like I like to, like, the further I get to the finish line, I like to mix the vocals as close to like how they'll be in their final form, which in this case is with a bunch of layers. So,
but baby, don't act like you're bad,
what it sounds like so far.
hey, you're losing your mind.
And then my next vocal chain. So I have my main plus the harms plus the effects. So like, I guess at this point it's worth going into the reverb. So my vocal reverb is basically just a pure plate. I actually shot it out. Big trick is to actually de-S your reverbs, because if you have your S's going into your reverbs, the S sound, those like high frequencies that happen from the S's, that gets caught by the reverb, and the reverb ends up like trailing those out, and you end up with like a frosty, like weird, like brittle reverb sound just from the S's alone. So you got to de-S your reverbs is what I found.
Keep your time.
After that, yeah, the pure plate is great. Just like a plate reverb on vocals. I usually don't use plates. I mean, sometimes I use plates, but sometimes I use halls. And I just take the bass down and the treble down a little bit. And the reverb time is not too long, but the reverb is definitely pretty wet. yeah, with this vocal, the reverb being wet was crucial. Just because it just puts it in that space, and you know the song's a vibe, so it needed a little bit of like, you know, wetness to the reverb, to the vocals. And then here's another thing that I do is I sidechain the vocal to a fab filter on frequencies that kind of like I felt like were conflicting. So what I'll do is I'll kind of like look around, search for where it sounds like the reverb is competing with the vocal, and then I'll duck that down, and then I'll sidechain the vocal to that as a dynamic band. And when it's a dynamic band and I'm sidechaining to it, it only ducks down when the vocal is there. So it kind of just, I mean, I'm ducking it down just in general, but I'm also having it react to the vocal overall. Same with these bands. And, you know, that kind of like keeps the reverb out of the way of the vocal and also, you know, has it react to it. So that's one thing that I do. And then the vocal delay, which is basically just like ping pong delay. It's not crazy. It's just an eighth note. You know what I mean? But all the vocals are going to it, and you know, it's definitely like, you know, filling out. Like listen to how like cool it sounds. Yeah, that's what you hear when after sleep at night, and you hear sleep at night, sleep at night, sleep at night. Like that's like that delay, like all those vocals being sent to that delay. Crucial thing with the delay, I've gone over this before, but I cut down to like 2.5K. Like I like, you know, I filter it because listen to what it sounds like without it.
I never asked for forever, but hey, you'll say I tried. Whatever helps you sleep at night.
Not that it sounds bad, but it sounds like, you know, you're just kind of like it's like it's not a delay, it's like an echo. You know what I mean? Like I don't really know. Like it's more of like you kind of just like it's repeating it versus like having it as an effect and a texture, which is kind of like what I feel like the filter does is it kind of puts it in the same space as the reverb, and we're not trying to clutter up the vocal in any way. So yeah, this is it without the filter.
I never asked for forever.
Here's with the filter.
I never asked for forever.
You see how it's like in the same space as the reverb, doesn't have all that like top end like annoying. It's not like it's annoying, but like, you know, it's just not fitting to be in the delay space. The other thing that I do is I actually sidechain the vocal to a compressor with kind of like what I've found is a release time of 1,000-ish. And then this kind of helps the delay creep up when the vocal is basically, you know, finished. And then so just check it out.
But hey, you'll say I tried. Whatever helps you sleep at night.
So you see how the vocal creeps up after it's done. So this keeps the delay out of the way of the vocal. And that way the vocal has the space to exist. And then when the vocal is done and it stops and there's a little bit of a space, the delay creeps up and fills that space a little bit. So that's one thing I discovered is that sidechaining your vocal to your delay is a straight amazing effect for like, you know, getting the delay to sit right in the mix. That and making it ping pong as well. Shout out the Make Pop Music YouTube channel because I actually just took some of these effects from that pop video of just like a slapback delay. That kind of just like, you know, adds a little bit more space to it as far as like kind of just, yeah, the slapback delay. I would just watch that video because like these effects are taken straight from that video. And then there's a short reverb that kind of just adds a little more space to it, adds a little more, I guess, like depth to it. It's kind of hard to hear. I have them pretty low in the mix. So I'm not going to go into these because, like I said, like you could just watch that video. But these are basically just things that just add a little bit more combination of like width and space and depth to the vocals. So this is just a chorus plugin that I added in.
I tried. Whatever helps you sleep at night.
But now when you hear it, you're just like, okay, it's compressed, it's EQ'd, it's got the top end, and now it's got reverb, and now it's got delay, and now it's got a few other effects, the short reverb, the slapback delay, and the chorus to just kind of like spread it out and give it a little bit more, you know. And then after that, I have all that stuff going to a bus that has my main and my harmonies and my effects, and I have OTT on this actually, just doing barely anything, and this just adds some multiband compression and just glues the effects to the vocals a little bit, and also just kind of like, you know, glues the vocals together in general. So here's without it.
I never asked for forever, but hey,
and here's with it.
I tried. Whatever helps you sleep at night.
It's just like you didn't know you needed that little extra bit to like tuck it in, but like after you hear it, you're just like, wait, it's mixed now. So OTT on vocal buses, OTC on anything is like you're taking a risk because like watch what is like this compressor is crazy. Like watch what happens when I put the depth to 100. It's like wow. But when you dial it back, just to like 10%, literally just 10%, just adds that little bit of like difference. That's without it. Here's with it. Kind of subtle, but what I've found is that it brings that top end out a little bit and just kind of like compresses the mid range even more, and compresses the vocal overall, obviously, but adds that top end to it to kind of like take it across the finish line. And then I have this EQ. I already talked about that a little bit. And then here is the thing is that I have like I said, I have a last line of defense EQ. I've mentioned this in all my other videos, but basically I just have like mad bitey shit, and at this point I'm just using a dynamic EQ for the most part. Some of these frequencies were just like perpetually offensive, hence me lowering them instead of just doing dynamic. But like listen to this and you'll like I'll go through each one and you'll be like, oh yeah, that's what, yeah, that sucks. Let's kill that. So telephonic / bitey. Bitey. That's the king of bite right there. That's 2.9 with my voice is the fucking devil. You hear that? Trash. Brittle, kind of like, yeah. That's like brittle, gross, like presence that no one needs. Presence is good, but this is not. And then here we got kind of like brittleness around like 8 point whatever, and then like that hurts. You know what I mean? Like all these frequencies hurt. So check it out now without this EQ. With the EQ. The vocal is much more even, much more calm. Like it's obviously like very aggressive, but like having this like last line of defense, like subtractive EQ. Oh, I boosted the top end. That's mad funny. But like having this last line of defense EQ really just takes the vocal across the finish line and takes care of those like last minute like frequencies that just suck. Like, I mean, you could take care of this earlier in the mix, but what I've found is that like I go back and forth a lot. So I'd rather have an EQ at the very end that I can tweak. That's at the very end to be able to adjust. So yeah, aside from that, I think the only thing with the vocals worth going into is that I have this like affected vocal here in certain other sections of the song, like this, for example. Let me just solo this because this is actually like so fire. So I'm gonna go through this vocal chain. Literally just like, ooh, I've been exposed. I took the auto-tune off. Listen to that. Ugh. You know what happened? I didn't edit this because I knew I was going to auto-tune it to shit. So that's what my raw sounds like. Sue me. Here's with the auto-tune on. Yeah. I feel like I need to defend myself because my vocal takes normally aren't. They've gotten better. I wrote this song originally for a female singer, and when Frankie heard it, when he heard my vocals on it, he was like, no, you have to sing it. So I had already written it, and we already produced it in this key. So the song was already out of my vocal range. So when I recorded these vocals, I was like, you know what I mean? Like I was just like straining so much. So like, hence the, yeah, so I liked the energy. The pitch is a little off. Hence, I comp based on energy, not pitch. And I feel like I've defended myself as much as I can at this point. So just some auto-tune, really fast retune speed, and then the de-esser. Yeah, de-esser is just de-essing. We all know what that does. So the vocal chain is pretty identical up until a certain point. So Soothe is there, doing its thing. Yeah. So here's the thing. It's this plugin. This is the plugin. This is how I get that distortion. Is the studio? It's like a tape saturation thing, but it's just driven like to all hell. Like check it out. It's the input is driven. So. Yeah. So that's how I got this sound. It's just this plugin just driving a tape saturator. And you wouldn't think that. You'd think like, oh, distortion. Nah, it's just like tape degrader, I guess. Yeah, I don't know like if this is a distortion plugin or what, but like, yeah, this is how I have it set, and this is how it's fucking up my vocal. And then I got my compressor and my EQ, same as the other stuff, and it's just this is obviously doing wonders for tucking it in a little bit more. So yeah, and then you hear it in the mix, and you're just like, it's not, it's like kind of low in the mix, but because of the distortion, because of everything else, it really cuts through. So same with these vocals, like they're not even that high in the mix, but having them that like compressed and that even sounding, and with that top end helps them cut through a lot. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the vocals. So moving on from vocals, let me start talking about some of this other stuff. So electric guitars, let me see what I did here. Electric guitars. So these are the I know what these are. These are the Palmy boys. Yeah. So with these guitars, I have an all guitars. Let me just bypass the all guitars situation. All right, so that's automated. So yeah, with these guitars, it's not like I can't like play that shit that fast. You know what I mean? So I just have an EQ, just like, cutting out dynamic EQ, reacting to some of these lower notes that are too much, sticking out like a high-end shelf. Then after that, I got our compressor. Not too fast of an attack time, because this is a very attacky part in nature. So basically, like, I don't want the attack time to be too fast, but it's still compressing these notes. And like when you have multiple notes, especially if it's not like a sampler, if it's like an actual like recording of an instrument, then there's like that human inconsistency. So you got to kind of like compress to even those notes out a little bit. And then here I got another compressor doing the same shit. Smack Attack is just kind of bringing the attack out and bringing the sustain down. Smack Attack's a great plugin. Like all these plugins are basically just bringing out the attack and evening out the notes in general. So you can hear that it's like really just like adding that attack to it. It's almost like click. Here's the deal, right? It's that 16th note delay. It's not ping pong, because if it was ping pong, then the guitar on this side would be on that side and the guitar from that side would be. So we don't want to do that. So basically, I just have like a 16th note delay, and the mix is up pretty high. It's like 40%. You don't want it at 50%, or it will lose that dynamic between the first pluck and the second artificial pluck. So I have it at like 41%. And that's the whole sound right there, man. And then one thing that's worth mentioning is these shits are quantized. So, yep, sue me. And then I have my clean guitar. My clean guitars. What are my clean guitars doing? Yep. So I got my clean guitars. Same thing. Just kind of like, shaping it a little bit, bringing up the top end and the sides, because I mean they're panned hard. So you're basically, I mean, like I could have just brought the top end up, but any information that was common between them in the center wouldn't be brought up because I'm EQing just the side channels up. Then I'm compressing it similar to the other one. With this one, I compressed the mid-range a little bit more just because I think that I needed to even it out a little bit so that that stuff didn't poke out too much. Just adding a little bit of compression just to keep those notes a little more consistent. Adding another EQ just to kind of like shape it a little bit more, keep it generally out of the way of some of the other mid-range stuff. Smack Attack. Okay, interesting. Okay. You wouldn't think, but now that I hear it, it does bring out. Adding a transient shaper can actually help differentiate between the different notes in the recording. So it adds that kind of like, it's almost like it creates an artificial space in between notes because it's bringing the sustain down and bringing the attack up. So it's like creating a space in between each note because of that. So I think that's what's happening there. Then a little bit of delay. Yep, just delay. Nothing to look into here. I mean, it is nope, it's not even filtered. Okay. So moving on. Nylon string guitar. So here's the deal with the nylon string guitar. I actually have it so that the hits are on a different channel. Let me actually go over the plug-in chain first. I recorded this through my AT whatever mic, and through the Avalon, through the distressor, and just like compressed the crap out of it. First thing I had to do is I had to denoise it because low-key this mic wasn't the best for it. Yeah, so had a little bit too much noise there, so sorry that the 808 is like so safer. It's automated, so I think that it won't let me like mute it or whatever. But yeah, then I have, you know, typical like housekeeping. Then this right here, this is the answer. That LA2A. You know what I mean? Just cutting those peaks down a little bit. Then I got Neutron. Neutron is what are we doing here? Adding fullness to the top end. Okay. Shaping it a little bit. Bringing some of that presence up a little bit. 4.5K is actually on the A list when it comes to frequencies, not gonna lie. What I've noticed, vocals and guitars and stuff, compressing it a little bit, just to kind of like even things out even more. Yeah, and then Smack Attack was on, and our compressor. Oops. Then this filter only happens in the very beginning of the song. You can't actually even hear it, so it's not worth going into right now. Smack Attack is just kind of like, you know, adding a little bit more tact to it, despite the fact that I compressed it. Again, same thing I do when, like, you know, when I EQ and I like even out the mid-range with multiband compression and then bring it up overall with tape saturation or something else. Same thing with compression, is I like, you know, I tame the transients overall with compression, and then I use like a transient shaper to just bring them all up almost like in unison, because like I've tamed them and then I've brought them up even more using a transient shaper, so that it's like, you know, they're compressed and they're even, but they're still attacky and they have that like, you know, attack to them because I put a transient shaper on after. So it's like, it's almost like we like undo what we did, but like in a cleaner way. But the result is cleaner. Yeah. So, you know, then some more compression. Just doing more compression, you know what I mean? And then, so the big thing that I really think is worth going into is that I actually I automated the reverb up for these hits, so check it out. So like the reverb is going to a plate, but I'm automating the plate up. I put this on a different track first of all, so that I could process it by itself, because this like is to be processed different from this. Because as far as I'm concerned, those are not the same instrument. From a mixing engineer's perspective, those are not the same instrument at all. So a little bit though. Like a lot of those like percussive sounds that come from a nylon string guitar have a lot in common with just hitting the guitar like that. You know what I mean? But as far as I'm concerned, like from a mix engineer's perspective, I might as well put that shit on a different track, because it's going to be processed differently, because it's like, you know, it's percussion. You know what I mean? I don't care what anyone says. So I low-key like did process it like probably the same, but the difference is that I have, you know, a different reverb and a different level of reverb, and that last hit that gets more reverb, because why wouldn't it? You know what I mean? Why would I give the same amount of reverb to these hits as the last hit? You know what I mean? Like, why would I give the same amount of reverb to the hits before it to the last hit? Because like the last hit is the one that you hear, and that echoes into the next, you know, into when the guitar comes back in. So like, you know, automating the reverb up for that one part really just kind of like gives you what you want. That's what you want, is you want that kind of like, you know what I mean? Like you want that last note to reverb out longer than everything else. Cause like listen to it now in the mix. You know what I mean? It's like, you know what I mean? And it just like trails into the next part. Like, yeah, like you can get as surgical as you want with automating effects and doing this like fine detail work if you know what your goal is. If your goal is to get that last note to ring out longer, it's very simple. Just automate the reverb up on that one note, and that's how you get that. So that's pretty much it for the guitar mix. As far as, I do have another couple of things happening here that aren't probably worth going into. I'm boosting 10K, so I'm adding a little bit more sparkle to it, and evening out that top end, I guess, because, you know, it's very, very top endy, especially with like the sound of the strings and, you know, my fingers on the metal and stuff like that. So as far as the guitar chain actually goes though, I have all my guitars going to an EQ that's basically just warming up that 200 a little bit, because, you know, guitars are a mid-range instrument, so they better carry that mid-range a little bit. The other thing that I have happening is I have the vocal going to track spacer on the guitar bus, and this is just adding a little, it's only affecting the mid channels because I think the vocal, well, it's affecting both channels, but it's a little bit more towards the mid because like the vocals are more towards the middle and the guitars are more, I guess, yeah, I guess I just kind of wanted to keep the guitar out of the way of the vocals on like a stereo level. So that's kind of what I did here. Like doing a little bit. What I found is track spacer is best used like 10% and below, to be honest. Like not even 5%, to be honest, sometimes. But like just that little bit. The guitars kind of disappear when you do that, so. Come on, there it is. Yeah, so that's what I've found is that, you know, track spacer is great, but you got to be kind of subtle with it. So the electric bass, I didn't really do a whole lot other than like auto-tune it. Actually, one more thing worth mentioning about these guitars overall is that towards the end of my mix, I felt like I needed a little bit more mid-range. So I was like, where am I going to add more mid-range in? And I decided on the guitars because the guitars are, you know, a mid-range instrument. So it makes sense that they'd carry the mid-range a little bit. So I just added this boost here to just like beef up the mid-range. Yeah, this, like I said, this EQ is great. And if you're trying to beef up the mid-range, you should try like 160, or in this case, I tried like, you know, 240, and that kind of makes sense. Like, yeah. So that kind of, you know, gives you an idea of like, you know, what I was going for is I was just trying to boost those mid-range frequencies a little bit because having enough mid-range in your mix is like so crucial. And it's best to take care of that as early in the process as possible. You know, I took care of it on the guitar bus as opposed to later in the master. You know, I also have a bass here, and the bass isn't doing a whole lot. Other than in the, yeah, it's like literally just in this one section. So I auto-tune it, right? Because I'm a savage. And then just a little bit of EQ. It's like I'm boosting yeah, because it's distorted as hell. So it's kind of just like, you know, boosting some of that. Having a little bit of a dynamic EQ on it. Compressing it a little bit. And then looks like I'm adding some, what am I even doing here? Oh, it's multi-band compression. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And then I think one other thing that I'm doing that I forgot to mention is that I'm sidechaining the drums to these. Yeah. I'm sidechaining the kick to the guitars. And what I do, my thing that I do is that I actually have all these things going to a guitar bus, and then I have my compressor that's sidechaining the kick to these guitars like on that bus. That way I don't have to put like, you know, 30 compressors across all my tracks. I can just put it on the bus. Other than that, I have these pad chords here. So these are being processed, probably not anything out of the ordinary, to be honest. Like that just has like an imager, maybe spread out the sides just a little bit, you know, makes sense because the vocal and the bass should be in the center, you know, evens out, brings in the width from the bass a little bit. So after that, you know, housekeeping, bringing down the mids slightly, and then using OTT to kind of just like compress probably the low end, to be honest. Let's check it out. Yeah, kind of just evens it out. OTT is kind of just like a band-aid for like, you know, the dynamics within frequency ranges is what I've found. And then our compressor basically just like making it consistent in volume. And then C4, doing a little more multi-band compression to the mid-range. And then after that, I just have, oh, I know exactly what this is. I'm sidechaining the kick drum to soothe. Yep. One cool trick that I have found is LOAIR. So LOAIR is a dope plugin because when you listen to this, I'm actually going to turn the sound up for the example. I probably have automation, so check it out. This is an underrated plugin, this LOAIR plugin. Like, if you listen to this sound without the LOAIR plugin, it's not going to have any sub to it, really. But when you put LOAIR on, what this does is it generates lower harmonics, and it adds a little bit of sub to it, which is crazy. Like, more people should know about that. Listen. That just adds sub to it. And then I kind of like, you know, added an EQ in just to kind of like even some of this stuff out. An imager just to kind of like center the bass a little bit more, because the bass was a little crazy because, you know, it's a serum patch. Soothe is going ham apparently, damn. So LOAIR basically just adds that extra level of like sub, especially when there's no when the 808 hasn't entered the song yet. You know, that LOAIR plugin kind of gives sub to this other instrument, and that's what kind of helps carry the bass in this intro section. Probably a little hard to hear, but it's there, and it definitely helps the intro hit a little bit harder because it has those sub frequencies in it. So yeah, LOAIR, highly recommend. Yeah, so with these riffy sounds, like, you know, a lot of these sounds, just like, you know, serum sounds just in general, like, you know, I took a lot of time going over the vocal stuff and the guitar stuff because it was recorded well, but, you know, with recordings that aren't processed, that aren't samples, that aren't like, you know, serum presets or like, you know, sound design in really good synths like Serum, like there's a lot that you kind of have to do to clean up those mixes. And you know, when you have like sounds that are kind of good out the gate because you're using like samples, like nicely cleaned up and EQ'd and compressed samples, and you know, good Serum presets or Serum sounds that you designed yourself in the production stage, you actually don't have to do as much, and mixing is a lot more fun because you could do things like literally just like, you know, smack attack to bring out the attack, and you know, ozone, what even is this? I guess it's a mid-side dynamics situation, but just like, you know, different sauces that you can use. So just a little bit more attack, a little bit less sustain, and I got ozone dynamics. It's funny because I'm like discovering what I did here. I'm compressing the mid. It's like a mid-side compression, so it looks like I'm just compressing the middle channel, probably to keep it out of the way of the vocal because the vocal's in the middle. And then I'm just kind of adding, what am I adding? I'm adding a little bit more 200 because this synth has a little bit of mid-range to it as well. And then with this other sound here, so that kind of like dead mousey sound, obviously Serum, but yeah, like this is really just kind of being like, you know, so this sound I had to like actually do a lot of work with. So first thing I had to do with this sound is actually just cut out the lows because obviously my bass is already taking care of that. Bringing up some of this because that's where some of the attack lives. And then, you know, one thing that I'm doing, I'm pretty much multi-band compressing the entire thing, but this thing had a lot of attack to it, so I kind of wanted to tame that a little bit with these kind of like higher bands in the multi-band. So like when you listen to it without it, it's like a little bit in your ears, you know what I mean? So this kind of helps maintain the attack a little bit, but also brings it down. So after that, this to kind of just like even things out, the LA2A, then another EQ to kind of like, you know, bring out the sides a little bit, bring down the mids, bring that down because that's going to be conflicting with the vocals and a lot of other stuff in the middle. Then bringing out the sides to give it a little bit more illusion of spread. And then OTT, of course, just doing what it does and making the sound kind of what you want. OTT kind of just makes the sound poke through a lot more, so. So moving on to this sound. This sound was actually a lot of fun. It's like I went into this in the production, but all it is really is just a sine wave. And it's very like, you know what I mean? Like, just, you know, these few frequencies, because that's how sine waves are, you know what I mean? It's just like they're very like focused, you know, hyper focused. So smack attack adds a little bit of separation between the notes. C6, just kind of like, you know, some of that stuff. It's kind of hard to work with sine waves just because of the fact that they're so focused, and as a result, it's almost like having resonances that you can't control because the resonance is the whole sound. But in this case, I was able to kind of just like solo that, solo these. So the sound is made up like for the most part out of these two frequency areas. So I kind of just compressed those areas specifically with the C6, used Soothe to quite literally do the same thing. So after that, I used R compressor to just even those notes out a little bit more. And there's actually no reverb on this sound, only delay. And I believe I thought about adding reverb, but some sounds you can get away with not adding reverb and just adding delay, for example, because first of all, it'll give the illusion of space and almost reverb because of the fact that, you know, delay is very similar to reverb in nature. So it's going to add that depth to it. And also there's already reverb on so many other things. So I don't really even have to, you know, add reverb to this because there's already reverb happening in so many other places and it has that delay to it. So that's all. And then some of the stuff not even worth going into. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. I'll talk about that later. And then, so again, I have all of my synths going to the kick. I have all my synths going to this synth bus, and it's called synths kick chain. And I have some of my synths going to the side chain synths bus, and then I have some of my synths going to the all synths bus. But the synth sidechain is also going to the all synths bus. So it's like I have a bus specifically for my synths that I want to sidechain the kick to, and then I have my bus for all my synths, including those synths that I just mentioned. So basically, like, you know, the kick is going to this, sidechaining to those synths just to keep a little bit of space open for the kick, and then I have all my synths that have basically this little bit of mid-range added in, because the synths carry the mid-range as well as the guitars. So I wanted to boost the mid-range and that stuff a little bit, because later towards the end of my mix I realized I needed more mid-range. So I did that there, and I did that to the guitars, which I mentioned beforehand. Then I have track spacer here that's basically just like has the vocals going to it. I already explained how that works. Same thing as the guitars. So with this other kick stuff, like I'm not going to go into the kicks and the 808s and all that stuff just because I already did that in my Watch Your Look video. So you can go ahead and watch that. And the 808 wide is actually, I already did that in my Caligula remix video. And that's actually taken from one of Davon Terrell's videos. So you should either go watch my video or go watch his video, but probably go watch his video because that's going to explain it way better. But, you know, in short, I just have like a bunch of compression and a soft clipper and boosting like 4K for that attack, attenuating 60 hertz because the sub exists around 60 hertz. And, you know, it's identical to the one in Watch Your Luck. So you could just watch, like I said, just watch my Watch Your Luck video and that'll give you a good idea. So with these kind of boom drums. So yeah, I guess I boosted the lows and then I compressed it, brought that out. Damn, that is a boomy drum. And then I added smack attack to add more attack to it. And then, so I'm compressing that low end as well, but just the low end because the low end was crazy. And then making the release really long so that, you know, it doesn't come up too quickly because it is a fast drum. I put reverb directly on my drum. And that's something that you normally would never do. The only reason this works is because there are no other bass elements happening here, so it's not going to clutter the low end. Know what I mean? It's bass. There's a bass guitar, but I wouldn't consider that like sub frequencies. So that's the only reason why putting reverb on the low end is like acceptable in this scenario. So, and even so, I'm lowering that 60 hertz, as you can see where some of that sub is. And then here I'm compressing the low end even more. I'm compressing, yeah. So I'm doing a lot to kind of keep this in check. And I'm even side chaining this to the bass. So part of the reason why this actually works is because I'm side chaining it to the electric bass in this section. And I'm side chaining it to the low end in the electric bass so that these two things don't conflict. This is huge, you know what I mean? Because it's like I have a boomy drum with a lot of low end and I have a bass with a lot of low end. So I sidechain the drum to the low end in the bass. That way the low end from the bass gets out of the way while this drum is happening. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's huge. That's just like, you know, that's just how you kind of like mix with all the elements in mind, as opposed to just like, you know, worrying about things and how they work by themselves. You got to think about how things work together, you know, with all the elements in the picture. Yeah, processed some of this other stuff. Similarly, the muffled snare just has a lot of like compression on it as well. Let me see. Yeah, so with this snare right here, it's basically just like a EQ. This is also kind of like a muffled snare. It's actually a kick that I think I pitched up, but like this compression is really kind of where that sound comes from. So having that fast release brings the tail out. So like a slower release would be like, but a fast release, you hear how that tail comes right up, and it, you know, really actually adds, like, I normally personally don't want my snares to have that much tail to them, but having, you know, a fast release on a compressor that adds that tail, and like in this case, in this song section, it works because, you know, the snare already has like mad reverb on it, so that extra long tail just fits the vibe here. And then just smack attack, I guess, bringing down some of that attack, because damn, I didn't want so much. Interesting choice, Nick, from however many months ago. So the snare drum. So here's how I process my snare. So basically, yeah, I have like, let me just go through this plugin chain. So in the other video, I detailed how I use like a ton of samples just to make this sound good, you know, by itself. I have, you know, a filter that I automate on in certain sections where I kind of want that. And then I have, you know, I guess a low pass. This kind of adds just some overall character and saturation to it, you know, and volume apparently. And then this compressor just kind of like, you know, tucks it in. Attack time is kind of fast, but at the same time, like, it doesn't kill it completely. But it tucks it in for sure, which is what I like. Yeah. Into the mix a little bit more. And then this kind of just like, so boosting 400 in snares is the trick, honestly. Like if you're trying to add more body to your snare using an EQ like this, you know what I mean? That. So a little bit of that just, you know, does the trick. That's, you know, just what the doctor ordered when it comes to like, you know, filling out your snare a little bit more. And then here I got a little bit of just like, you know, bring that on the top end a little bit. Yeah, because if you master, like when you master your mix, if your snare has too much happening, then yeah, look, I tamed this a little bit even so, but it's okay because sometimes like I like what the API gives me. I just need to like ease off of it very slightly. But like, yeah, like when you go to master and you go and you have like a snare that's too harsh and your mastering engineer tries to add top end or whatever, or you try to add top end. I mean, I personally love adding top end at the end of my master. Then you're gonna run into problems. So that's why your snare can't be too harsh. Interesting thing that I did, here's a thing for you. I added a chorus to my snare and it actually worked really well. Here's what it sounds like turned up. Yes, adding a chorus to your snare is a sauce. You could try that and it will definitely, you'll be surprised with the results because you'll get a wide snare. Like, has anyone ever told you to get a wider snare or whatever? Just add a chorus to it. I mean, I don't really know if that's a thing. I mean, I personally tell my students that to like get their snare a little bit wider by either layering samples or doing this, because adding a chorus to your snare is kind of, you know, a trick that I feel like I've never heard this trick mentioned before, but I think that people should know about it. And then, you know, the other thing is that I actually add a smack attack to that because I don't want the attack on those chorusy side snares to be too much, to overshadow the main snare, because you kind of want your attack to be in the center, just generally speaking. So like I bring down that attack and I also bring down that sustain a little bit, just to have those side chorus snares be a little bit more supplementary as opposed to like reinforcement. I don't really know how to describe. Like, it is reinforcement, but it shouldn't be reinforcing like the attack of the snare, or it shouldn't really need to. It's just kind of reinforcing the spread. And then yeah, I have a pure plate on here that basically just kind of like plates on snares is the way to go in my opinion. And then I add some reverb to it, just kind of like, you know, do that. And then what is this? Oh, I did track spacer. I sent the snare to track spacer on the reverb just to keep that reverb a little bit out of the way. So yeah, and then I have some big claps as well that come in here. So a lot of that is just like, you know, smack attack and stereo enhancer, just adding that spread to it. Yeah. Just a little bit of stereo enhancer. You know these plugins, you know, they just kind of like one knob, turn it up, add stereo effect to it. So that's kind of what I use there. Okay, so moving on to the hi-hats. So with the hi-hats, I actually did send the hi-hats to reverb. I don't normally do this, but in this song, I think that it fit the vibe. I should actually do this more because I actually do love the sound of like reverby hi-hats. It's not playing. There it is. That's just the main hi-hat. I didn't really do much here. I just kind of like, you know, this plugin right here is great for just hi-hats and drums in general. Just kind of brings it forward. You do have to gain match it though with the gain plugin, but yep, Renaissance axe on the hi-hats. That's it. And then yeah, the other thing that I have is my trap hat pattern, which is just like, you know, a couple different hi-hats. I go into this in the production example, but you know, again, just kind of like Renaissance axe, and then just like a fuck ton of transient shaping. Here's without it. Here's with it. Kind of just brings that stuff forward. The mix is down too, so I'm not that. So crash cymbals. So here's the thing with crash cymbals. Like, they can be very harsh if you're not careful. So what I've found with crash cymbals is de-essers and soothe. You got to do one or the other. I did neither here. I don't believe that. Yeah, there's a de-esser right there. So just smack attack, adding a little bit more tack to it. Soothe, bringing that down a little bit. This matte cymbals preset is pretty much what you need. And then this, adding some punch to it, but also compressing it. And then it's the de-esser on the cymbals that do it for me. So here's without it. Here's with it. Kind of just tames it a little bit, just enough, you know what I mean? So that's what I've found. Cool. So reverse cymbals. Yeah, there's a slay sound, but it's literally just soothe. So and smack attack. And at this point, you guys know what those plugins do. The reverse cymbal. So here I have soothe happening on the reverse cymbal. The reverse cymbal is actually crucial to like the drop because it's kind of all you hear. This matte cymbals preset. That's basically it. And then this plugin right here. All you need is kind of like a compressor to kind of like move with the reverse cymbal, and that's what does the trick. And then a little bit of taking down this craziness. Yep, you don't want that. That's gonna hurt your ears. And then a little bit of C4 just to also move with that top. Wow, that actually makes a huge difference. Yeah, damn, I should do this more, adding C4 to the, like, listen to that. Kind of hurts, right? And then this kind of, it moves with the top end, so that's definitely very helpful for getting this to be a little bit less like in your face, you know. And then the sticks, just smack attack and Renaissance axe. And then with the drums in general, I kind of just like, you know, add a little bit of compression of the drums overall. Yep, just kind of tucking the kick in, tucking some of those other drums in, and then C4 just kind of like compressing the top end overall. You know what I mean? Because that stuff right there will come back to bite you in the ass if you're mastering and you try to add top end. So that's what I kind of do, is I kind of just like add a multi-band compressor on the drums overall. Like, that sounds good, right? That sounds a little bit more in the pocket when it's has that multi-band compression on it. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And then I have, you know, a few other effects here. I'm not doing a whole lot with much of it, to be honest. Like, yeah, like I got soothe and C4 on some things. C4 is kind of doing the same thing. Like this white noise riser, for example, you know, this thing. You know, same idea as the reverse cymbal. It's just compressing that, sort of like, you know, compressing that and making it less annoying in the top end as it comes up. So yeah, I just have several different reverbs that I have for different situations. Like I have, you know, a hall here, and then I have echo verb that kind of works on like, you know, things like the hi-hats and stuff like that. Then I have a few other halls. For example, there's one part of the song that's worth mentioning. Like I have this part here that kind of comes in like you hear how the snare does this like crazy shit where it's like, so what that is, it's just a really wet hall, you know, this really wet hall and it's obviously up really loud. And then I turn the top end up a little bit, and then I have this tremolo that's automated on, like you'll see it turn on here. And it's basically just like 30-second notes that's panning from left to right, like, you know, on a tremolo. And this reverb is only automated in that one part. And, you know, these reverbs play a part throughout the song just in general, but not as much, you know. Or actually, it looks like they're not doing much, but like the main hall reverb is just a hall here on like some of the sounds. I mean, the main reverbs I've already gone over, like, you know, the vocal reverb is a plate, the snare reverb is a plate, and then, you know, I just have like other things like, you know, hi-hats and some of these other sounds going, like you can kind of see them scattered throughout. Like I have like, you know, my big claps going to 2 different reverbs. I got my guitar, I know my guitars have their own reverb as well. So yeah, I mean, there's just different effects. And then I have my kick side chains to a compressor on this you know, reverb bus, that all the reverbs are going to this. And then you'll see that the kick is kind of like extending to this reverb bus, because, like, you know, like I said, like I just clean up my mixes as much as possible using tools like this. So yeah, so the kick is kind of just like, you know, keeping the reverbs in check when the kick actually hits. So yeah, and then I guess I just have like an extraneous delay here, but that's pretty much my mix as a whole. And then, you know, when you look at it, tonal balance control, you can kind of see that it's kind of in the pocket here. Or I loaded a Nothing Nowhere song into this, and that's why it looks like that. But let's just reset this. Yeah, you can see, right? It has enough mid-range, has enough bass. The bass is like right in the middle. I struggle with getting the bass to be in the right spot. And yeah, I mean, like, it's a little heavy here, and I feel like that's because of the vocal. But like, yeah, otherwise, that's pretty much the whole mix. And yeah, I think I've covered everything. This was one of my longest ones, and I think that, you know, I probably won't have to cover as much in some other videos because there's a lot of stuff that I covered here. So yeah, I hope you found this helpful, and I hope that there's something that you learned from this. I think, you know, some of the main takeaways are, you know, come back to like cleaning up your mix as much as you can using things like sidechain and dynamic EQ and, like, you know, track spacer and stuff like that. And also just like doing cool things like automating effects and just like, you know, having enough movement, having enough just in general. And also, you know, making sure you have enough mid-range, making sure you're keeping your top end in check using things like dynamic EQ and, you know, multiband compression. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you have any, you know, questions, and please check out the song and let me know what you think. And yeah, I will see you guys on the next one. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Peace.